Dear Church, the 17th century English poet John Donne once wrote that more than mere kisses, letters mingle souls. This is the last of our Dear Church series in which we've been exploring and reflecting on the letters of the New Testament, the mingling of the hearts and souls of those authors, the Spirit-inspired leaders and apostles in the church with their audiences, their beloved congregations and friends, individuals. We've covered Paul's letters to 7 different communities and to 3 individuals, Peter's 2 letters also, and 3 letters by John, as well as the strange and unique letter of Hebrews. We've also looked at 2 letters, James and Jude, which scholars think may well have been written by 2 of Jesus' own brothers. But today, we come to letters written by Jesus himself. The book of Revelation, the final book of the Bible, is a letter sent to a group of churches in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, sent by the Apostle John. But the content of the letter is actually taken from a profound vision which John received while exiled to the tiny island of Patmos. The risen Jesus instructed him to record and pass along the vision to these churches. So while John is the scribe of the letter, Jesus himself provides the content. John describes the moment of his revelation, his vision, like this, saying, "It was the Lord's day, and I was worshiping in the Spirit. Suddenly, I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet blast." A voice like a trumpet blast that I can't help but think of like the Charlie Brown teachers whenever I read that. The voice said, "Write in a book everything you see. Send it to the 7 churches in the cities of Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea." When John turned around to see where the voice he heard was coming from, what he saw was surprising. There was no trumpet, there was no Charlie Brown teacher. The first thing he saw was lampstands, like big candle holders or oil lamp holders, 7 of them. And among the 7 lampstands was the source of the trumpet voice, someone that he described as being like the Son of Man. The Son of Man figure is wearing a long robe and a golden breastplate. His hair was a blizzard of white, much like mine. His eyes were pouring forth fire, and both of his feet were like glimmering furnace-fired bronze. His voice took on this thunderous quality of ocean waves, and a sword emanated from his mouth. He held 7 stars in his right hand, and his face shone like the sun. Dude. John's knees buckled, and he collapsed. He fell at this person's feet like a corpse, because what else are you going to do in a situation like that? He was, of course, seeing a vision of the glorious resurrected Jesus, the living Jesus, who, placing his right hand upon John, that same hand that held 7 stars, spoke again, saying, "Don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I died, but look, I'm alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and the grave. Write down what you've seen, both the things that are now happening and the things that will happen." And what follows in chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation is a series of short letters dictated by Jesus to those 7 churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. The island of Patmos, where John was being warehoused, where he was exiled, is only about 50 kilometers from the mainland. And on a clear day, from one of the rocky, dry hills, John would have been able to climb up and see across the water the faint shoreline of the land where these 7 churches were that he knew, that he cared for. They were located there. Each of these 7 letters more or less follows a pattern that you would pick up on if you read them in Revelations 2 and 3. Give them a look. Jesus introduces himself with some pretty cool titles or descriptions that pick up on John's earlier description of him from the vision. He states what he knows about the churches, the good, the bad, and the ugly. He invites reformation, and he issues an invitation to listen. If anyone has an ear, he says, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. These 7 communities are affirmed for untiring and vigilant work, for bravely suffering, for not denying Jesus amid persecution, and for growing and developing discipleship. They're affirmed for brave steadfastness. In each their own way, these churches are giving expression to their faith in the risen Jesus. There's nothing mentioned about keeping up with fads or fashions or the trends of society at large. There's no recommendations for how many services they have to run or what their attendance numbers look like, or even for their relevance or their influence or how on point their social media presence is. Rather, they're affirmed for virtues and habits that look relatively quiet and unassuming, but deeply, deeply faithful. On the flip side, these churches aren't all pure and lovely. We know that no church ever existed in a pure state, not even these first generation churches. The fleas come with the dog, right? Human beings bring their old sin habits with them when they join the fray of the Christian community. And actually, more often than we would like to admit, sometimes new sins actually develop out of our best intentions to live a faith life. In a sense, these 7 churches could be seen as a sampling of any 7 churches at any time in the church's history, not any better, not any worse than 7 other randomly selected churches from a specific region. Repeatedly, Jesus has John scribble down the phrase, "I have this against you." It's sort of a statement about Jesus' work toward the ongoing reformation that's required in the life of his beloved people of these churches. For the 7 churches of Revelation, this reformation takes various forms. They're confronted and corrected by Jesus for abandoning their first love, Christ himself, for being indifferent to heresy and false teaching, for being tolerant of sexual immorality, playing fast and loose with idol cults, for apathy, for indifference, for allowing riches and a life of luxury to supplant a life in the Spirit. Jesus desires to see these churches turn back to faithfulness where they're failing to repent. There are rewards for those who persevere, for those who overcome, and consequences for those who don't. We'd do well as churches to consider what Jesus might say to us if he were writing a letter to Faith Covenant or a letter to Holy Community. What does he see? What does he know about our churches? What might he commend us for? And what might he have against us? Some of the very same things mentioned here to these 7 churches would probably be said about us, I would guess. Our faithfulnesses, our failures probably don't look so dissimilar from those of these first churches. Consider maybe with less speculation and more contemplation, more listening, what Jesus not only would say, but is saying to us as churches right now. Honestly assess whether or not we are actually attentive enough to hear the voice of him who speaks to the churches still this day. If we have ears, and most of us do, we should listen. Maybe even more so than any encouragement for our good deeds or any reprimand for our communal deficiencies, I want to draw us this morning to a deeper awareness of the central reality in these chapters, which is this: that this glorious Jesus, who John describes, stands among the churches. So after hearing the trumpet voice, John's vision begins with him seeing the lampstands, the 7 lampstands. Before he perceives the one like the Son of Man, he sees lampstands. That's where the vision begins. That's the context for the Son of Man vision. John is told that these 7 lampstands represent 7 churches, and the 7 stars that Jesus holds in his right hand, they represent the angels of those churches, which we take to be more or less representatives or even personifications of the churches themselves. Jesus is among the 7 lampstands, and the 7 stars are in his right hand. If you have ears, listen to this. Jesus, the fire-eyed, glimmering, mighty, glorious Jesus who died but is alive, the one who has conquered death and owns it, that has the keys to prove it, that Jesus is standing with and among these churches. In all of their faithfulness and all of their foibles, he's standing among them, holding them in his hand, fully aware, fully knowing, fully understanding that they are far, far from perfect, but never loosening his grip, never walking out of their midst. The one like the Son of Man stood among the lampstands and here holds the 7 stars. The one whose face radiates like the sun stands among the people he has called to be light. Jesus is among the churches. Even now, if you have ears, you should hear this, that the mighty Jesus walks among his church. He holds us in his almighty grip. This is a powerful picture. And in a world that's often chaotic, in which trouble is always present today, just as it was 1900 or so years ago, we need to hang on to this, just like the first audience. A ragtag collection of churches experiencing trouble from within and without needed to hang on to it. So do we. Jesus stands among the churches. He holds the churches in his hand. May every moment of our life together, even in this season, be deeply grounded in this reality. And may the Spirit, in speaking this truth to us over and again, draw us deeper toward the kind of faith that overcomes. Jesus is standing among you today.